So I was looking at doing another video about a unit and going over the strengths and weaknesses and if I think it's any good, and I thought today we would move on to something away from 40k and check out the queen of the spooky ghosts herself, Lady Olynder. Now, for those of you that know me, I am of course all about the Dark Angels in 40k, but in Age of Sigmar and Fantasy, the undead have my heart. Nagash, Vampire Counts, the Tomb Kings, Soulblight, the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, the Nighthaunt. I just love everything undeath, to the extent that even when it comes to the end times, whilst I will agree overall it was not great, I actually thought the first book, Nagash, was really good. I would say it was definitely the best of the series and really did set up the idea of this impending doom and apocalyptic undead rising from the graves feel really well. I thought the first End Times book with Nagash was actually, unironically, really good. And so today I wanted to start a series of AOS focused reviews, and I thought that with the recent release of Usharan, it might be fun to go through all of the Mortarchs, and so today we are starting with Olynder. Lady Olynder is the Mortarch of Grief, the head honcho of the Nighthaunt armies, and in AOS that means you are going to be looking at something fast, something that will ignore rend on its armor saves, and has some very nasty army abilities, but can actually be relatively fragile, both rules-wise and model-wise. I mean, have you seen Olynder? She's literally held onto her base by like 3mm of plastic. It's actually insane. But in any case, the Nighthaunt as a whole have some very strong basic battle traits, and that, in my opinion, makes up a lot of their points cost and also their effectiveness on the battlefield. Ethereal is probably the most well known. It gives Nighthaunt, and so Lady Olynder included, a 6-up ward save, the ability to ignore all save modifiers positive and negative, and also new in their 3rd edition battle tome, the ability to retreat and still charge. So they are very slippery, and they can basically charge every single turn if they want to. And the ability to do that is really strong for Nighthaunt because they also have the Wave of Terror battle trait. And what that means is that after you've charged, you look at the roll that you made for the charge, and if you rolled a 4 to 7, you can select Shriek, which gives it -1 to hit for the enemy unit you've charged into. On an 8 to 9, you can instead select Stun, which subtracts 1 from the enemy armor saves in that combat phase, or if you roll a 10+, you can Petrify them and give them Strikes Last for the phase. Now, what's crucial about this ability is that you can choose a lower option if you roll higher. So if you rolled an 11 on your charge roll, you could choose to Shriek, Stun, or Petrify the enemy unit, depending on what is going to be most useful for you. And also, these all stack. So if you have 3 separate units charging in and all of them roll an 8+, for example, you could put 3 stuns onto the enemy unit and essentially make them -3 to their saves. So that kind of thing is incredibly powerful. It is somewhat swingy as an ability because whilst you get something on a 4+, which is reliable, the really good stuff like Stun and Petrify, you do need to roll that 8 or even 10+ to get it off. But if you have lots of small units and you are retreating and charging with them all game long, this is going to go off a lot. And even though it is the worst option, Shriek is still very good. Giving your opponent -1 to hit gives your armies just that extra durability against enemy attacks. So don't get me wrong, it's an amazing battle trait, it's a really useful tool, but it is also important to note it only affects that following combat phase. So in subsequent combats or ongoing combats, or if the enemy charges you, this won't have an impact. And what that means is that Nighthaunt units really do need to be getting the charge off, or else they really will struggle. And if you have an enemy unit that can, for example, make it so you can't retreat, that can really ruin your day as a Nighthaunt player. Nighthaunt units also have Aura of Dread, which means enemy units within 3 inches are counted as being terrified and they can't use Inspiring Presence. This is an incredibly strong ability. Inspiring Presence is something that gets used a lot in AOS and it means that Battle Shock is going to be a really big factor for your opponent. They are going to be at risk of losing a lot of stuff and being unable to auto pass that Battle Shock test with Inspiring Presence, so more of their stuff is going to run away. And to help you actually get those wounds through to cause the Battle Shock test, you also get Frightful Touch, which is a rather simple battle trait, but a really good one. 6s to hit, auto wound. Now, quite a lot of Nighthaunt stuff isn't the best at wounding, so getting those wounds through automatically is a big deal, and with reference to Olynder herself, she has got 10 attacks on her profile, so on average she will be getting a couple of 6s, so this is actually going to have an impact on her as well. The last few things you get as an army are Vanishing Phantasms. This is a very sneaky ability to move 3 units into reserves, so you can massively bait an opponent into deploying on one side of the board and then just straight up remove 3 units and have them show up at the end of one of your movement phases, so you can put them right where you need them, 9 inches away from an enemy to attempt a long bomb charge, or just go straight to the other end of the board and grab some objectives your opponent thought were safe. Or you can just simply use this to, as I said, bait the enemy and then move 3 units of your army away from them, so you avoid that big, scary, slow-moving Death Star that your opponent had placed right opposite your main battle line. So this is a very strong ability and really can be used effectively to basically put an enemy army or an enemy unit into a really bad position. Finally, you also get a unique command ability. You get Discorporate. This is great. As you will remember, Ethereal means you ignore positive and negative modifiers, so you can't get things like +1 to your armor save with all-out defense. This is a way to get around that, and this essentially just boosts your ward save instead. You choose a unit which is about to get hit by a shooting or a melee attack, and they simply get a 5-up ward instead of a 6-up. This is really strong, and backed onto your mostly 4-up unrendable armor save means that a lot of your stuff will essentially be able to shrug off a good 66% of the attacks that come through into them. So it's really, really nice and is going to be an absolute lifesaver against scary charges from units that have a load of attacks or a load of damage on their weapons. So those are your army traits. Olynder benefits from all of those herself. There are also 4 processions, which are basically your army subfactions. Olynder's lore-wise is the Grieving Legion, but none of them actually do anything specifically for her, and she can join them all without any problem, so it's not really worth going into them. You take whichever one the rest of your army is built around, or the one that you like the most. But now on to the lady herself. She comes in at 270 points, which has been a big drop from her old value of 310. I actually think she may have been more than that in the book when it first came out. I believe she was 340 points originally, so she has essentially dropped 70 odd points since the book first released, which is quite a lot. But what she gets for that is a not super potent, but not terrible stat line. She has an 8-inch move, she has 7 wounds, she's got a bravery of 10 and a 4-up save. Now remember, that is unrendable, so that essentially nets her 14 wounds worth of wounds, to repeat myself, against any non-mortal wound attack. So it's not bad. She is fast, she is brave, and although I think she would be more worth 270 points if she had, say, 9 wounds instead, she can survive a decent amount. On top of that, her durability is boosted even more with the Grave Sands of Time. This just flat out gives her a 4-up ward save, so now every attacker going into her has to hit, has to wound, and then 50% of those are ignored from the unrendable save, and then another 50% are ignored from the ward. And even against mortal wounds, she does now have a 50% chance to just shrug them off. It's a very strong ward save and means that from a 3+ to hit, 3+ to wound profile, you would need around 65 attacks to kill her off in a single round, which definitely isn't an easy thing for most armies to do. So she is tanky, don't get me wrong. I just think, as I said, she could very easily have 9 wounds and still not be super OP at 270 points. She is also a wizard. She can cast and unbind 2 spells, which is nice. Nighthaunt aren't the most magical army in the game, so having a hero that can cast and unbind too is very welcome. It can just help you put a little bit more punch into your magical game, although it is worth noting she doesn't have any bonuses to her cast rolls, so she can sometimes struggle to get spells off against some of the better magical armies in the game. And she is also a War Master, so she will count as the general even if you pick another hero to be your actual general, which is a nice little bonus to have on her as well. Like all Nighthaunt units, she can also fly, which makes her 8-inch move and the Wave of Terror ability even more effective. Being able to get round pieces of terrain and other units more easily thanks to fly means you really can get the charge off into the unit you want to, which is really, really crucial for Nighthaunt armies. And then when she does get the charge off, she has a few moderately decent attacks. She gets 4 from her Staff of Midnight, and then 3 from her Banshees and their Spectral Claws. The Staff is her main attack though. It gives her 4 attacks that hit and wound on 3s, they're -2 rend and they do a flat 2 damage. The extra attacks from the Handmaidens are 6 attacks, they hit and wound on 4s, they're -1 rend and they're 1 damage. So overall, it's nothing amazing. She is not a combat hero like Neferata or Usharan, but she can fend off smaller units. On average, she will kill a good 4 or 5 models with 1 wound and a 4-up save, so she's not killing skull crushers anytime soon, but she can actually fight her way out of a paper bag if she needs to. She also has a very, very spicy ranged attack, which is basically just her looking at you in a mean way. Lifting the Veil is a 12-inch range ability that you use in the shooting phase. You choose an enemy unit and you roll a dice. On a 2+, they take as many mortal wounds as the dice roll. So you don't need to roll to hit or to wound, which is really nice. They don't get a save, except for ward saves, obviously. You just roll a dice, and then if you roll a 5, bam, 5 mortal wounds into that enemy unit. You also get +1 to the roll if the target unit is terrified, and then even better, if you kill any enemy models, you heal D3 wounds on Olynder for each model slain. So if she is down to just 1 wound left and you use this ability and kill even just 2 models, you can potentially get all of her wounds back. If you kill 3 or 4 models, then even with just average rolling on those D3, you will still also get her back to full wounds. So again, she can be much tankier than you would expect. Between her armor save and her ward save and the heal from this ability, she can survive a good amount of damage and stick around for quite a long time. The ability itself is solid, it's good mortal wound output, it goes off on a 2+. Yes, it has a shortish range, which is a downside, but the fact that you can put up to 7 mortal wounds into an enemy unit and heal yourself at the same time does make it really, really good. It's very powerful at clearing off chaff or just taking out big chunks from larger units too. So it's a very good ability and definitely something that you want to be using every single shooting phase. So she's durable and she can do moderate damage, but on top of that, Olynder is also a very good utility piece. She comes with the No Rest for the Wicked rule, which is a fantastically strong ability. Nighthaunt, despite being undead, don't have quite the same level of recursion as you see in armies like Soulblight or Flesh Eater Courts, or to be honest, even the Ossiarch Bone Reapers in many ways. But this ability allows you to, once per battle in your hero phase, return D6 models to every summonable unit on the battlefield. Not within a certain range, on the entire battlefield. So if you have 3 or 4 or 5 units of summonable stuff, and they've each taken a few hits and had a few casualties, this could get you back to full strength on all of them. It's really strong, and even more impressive when you notice this doesn't give you D6 wounds back, it gives you D6 models. So your 2 wound Hex Wraiths, you could get 6 of them back. Your 3 wound Spirit Hosts, you could get 6 of them back. It is, I would say, easily one of the best recursion abilities in the entire game, just for the fact that it is unlimited range and the fact that it brings back whole models. If you bring a squad of 6 Spirit Hosts and they die until there's 1 left and you use this ability and you get all of them back, that's just netted you in the region of around 200 points worth of models. And if you've got 2 of those units of Spirit Hosts and they're both down to 1 model left, and you manage to roll a 5 or a 6 on the dice roll to get full squads back for each of them, that's like 400 odd points of models you've just got back, not counting any extra, you get back on things like Chain Rasps or Grimgas Reapers or anything like that. The fact that you can bring back units or models to all units on the battlefield just gets you so much back, and it's a really strong ability to help you survive a big enemy attack, steal or hold an objective that you're on, or just keep your army going as the later turns of the game come around and both sides start to kind of get ground down as the combats continue. Obviously, on top of that, being a Mortarch, she does have a Mortarch ability. Hers is called Mortarch of Grief, and this is another powerful ability. This allows you to control what your enemy can do in some ways. You roll a dice whenever an enemy uses a command ability within 12 inches of her, and then on a 5+, not only does the enemy unit not get that command, but the command point is also spent, so they lose a CP and they don't get their ability. Now, 12-inch range is quite short, and a 5-up roll isn't exactly reliable, but stopping a key unit from getting all-out attack or all-out defense or a key redeploy and costing them a command point for the pleasure of it can genuinely be a game-winning use of this ability. Even if you just get it off once or twice in a game, it can massively swing that command point economy in your favor, and that sort of thing in AOS really will help you to win games. The final thing that Olynder has is her own unique spell. She has a spell called Grief Stricken, which is 18 inches, it casts on a 7+, and you choose an enemy unit within range, and until your next hero phase, it gets -1 to its hit rolls, but then also your units get +1 to hit it. So not only is this a debuff, but it also buffs your units going into it. So essentially, if there is a big scary enemy Death Star that you really need to take care of, not only will it make it easier for you to kill them, but it will also blunt their return damage into you quite significantly, and that ties in very, very well with the Wave of Terror idea of you wanting to get a charge off, but not wanting to be stuck in ongoing combats where you are much less potent. Overall, I would say it is a decent spell. It certainly has a good effect on it, but it is cast on a 7, and as I said, with no innate bonuses to her casting, it can be somewhat unreliable for Olynder to get off. I kind of wish that it was on a 6+, or Olynder had even just +1 to cast, just to make it that bit more reliable for her to cast this. But still, for what it is, it's a decent spell, and it is one you probably do want to try and get off to take care of your opponent's scariest unit. In general, Olynder is I would say, a pretty decent Swiss Army knife style unit. She is reasonably fast, she is reasonably tanky, she is reasonably killy, she has some reasonable utility, she has reasonable casting, and she has some admittedly very good shooting. She is definitely worth taking in a Nighthaunt list, I would say, and you really can make her a key part of your army, boosting your magical prowess, giving you some extra range damage, and giving you some very, very strong recursion, albeit once per game, and also, of course, just giving you an extra unit to charge in to try and proc more waves of terror. I just think she isn't quite worth 270 points in my opinion. And whilst they could drop her down, I would actually prefer, if I'm being honest, that she got bumped up in price. I would like her to be like the other Mortarchs, which are all 400+ point beasts. Maybe give her some extra wounds, some bonuses to her casting, a few extra stronger attacks, maybe some kind of aura to kind of fit in with her Mortarch of Grief ability, giving out a -to hit or a -to wound or reduced attacks, just to go along with her lore of this floating aura of dread and despair and grief, just making enemy units nearby lose all willpower and ability to fight. I think that would be really fitting for her, and if you gave her all of that and kind of just made her better rather than making her cheaper, improve her actual stat line and abilities, and then make her this 400 point Mortarch to go alongside ones like Catacross and Usharan and Manfred, that's how I would like to see her bumped up in the next army book personally. I do like Olynder, I have to say. I think she is good for Nighthaunt armies. I just wish she had a tiny bit more to her and wasn't just decent at a lot of things, but she actually had a few things that she was really, really strong at. Unfortunately, I think at the moment, it's just the case that Nighthaunt aren't super competitive, so Olynder is good for what you have the option for, but I think in comparison to various other armies, heroes and leaders and sort of special units, she would be maybe more towards the decent but not super competitive side of things. But as always, I'd love to know what you think of Olynder. Is she worth taking in Nighthaunt armies, do you think? And what would you like to see her get if she got a bump up to 400 points? Or would you prefer she just got brought down points and was maybe 250 or 240 to fit in with the stat line that she has now? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.